Welcome to Podcast Like It's 1992, the podcast where we talk about the films of 1992 here from our perch in 2023. I am one of your hosts, Phil Iscove.
Extra. I'm your special guest co-host, Emily St. James, sitting in for your normal host, that rat bastard, Joseph Pulitzer.
So with us today, back to talk with us is Dana Schwartz, author, writer, extraordinaire, podcaster, who has created, obviously, the podcast Noble Blood, which can be heard on wherever you listen to podcasts. Dana, thank you for talking Newsies with us today.
Oh my God, thank you so much. If there's one thing that I want the people to know about me, it's that I'm a huge dork for musical theaters and immediately fall in love with earnest boys who are dancing on a stage.
Listen,
We're putting on a show.
They are putting on a show.
Everyone's like, why is Ariana Grande sleeping with that guy? And I'm like, well...
I was like, you see, this is the power of being a straight boy in musical theater.
Exactly.
I mean, that's interesting. That's an interesting take.
100% what it is. You see a boy who can do musical theater, and it immediately clicks some weird animal part of a woman's brain.
Not to completely do a tangent on this, but
Please.
There are two places where guys who look like that can just pull incredibly beautiful women, and it's evangelical Christian churches and musical theater, because those are spaces where, like, most of the traditional straight guys, you know, the like athletic types who are very hot. I don't want to say they're not very hot, but like are just not really present. So if you're a straight guy there, even if you look like a huge nerd, you know, you're because a lot of guys there are gay, and in Christian churches they're just like not there. So
I do think it's worth noting, just out of the gate,
and it's charisma. Yes, I have to say, sorry, just to charisma. And like talent is really appealing to women. So that's my advice to incels.
But there's a lot of very cute boys in this movie, guys.
I mean, you have to say, having been in a musical theater program in South Dakota State University, there were some straight boys there who got way hotter girls than they should have, despite a lack of charisma, just because they were straight.
It's fair.
I was texting with a friend of mine who saw that when I was tweeting about watching Newsies. And he said something to me that I didn't know, and I'm curious if this is something you guys knew about Newsies. He texted me and was like, Newsies was a huge queer movie for queer boys. Like, it was this kind of moment for him. He remembers watching Newsies for the first time, and that was kind of the lightning bolt for him. And then I was texting with some other, gay friends that I have, asking if this is a thing. And I guess this was a thing, like, generationally. I think because this movie played so much on Disney Channel, and like that's where it kind of grew its, cult status, if you will. I think that a lot of boys were not indoctrinated, but like saw this so much and were like, these are some very cute Newsies.
Newsies. I mean, it gave me my straight awakening.
Sure,
it was one of the
Christian
factors.
Bale.
Yeah, I love Christian Bale. And I mean, not a little bit later, I have to say, I was walking in New York and I saw Jeremy Jordan with a little pair of glasses, and my heart like stopped in my chest.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, it
People wonder why millennials and Gen Z are so queer and so pro-labor, and it's just Newsies. It's literally just plunk this down. Yeah.
I mean, we talked about
your horniest podcast.
I hope so. I mean, these Newsies are hot. It's a lot of like hot, kind of dirty, dusty boys sleeping in beds together.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I mean, I don't know how. I get it now, but like I just didn't get it then.
And one of them is the sort of Jewish coded. Oy vey.
A little bit Jewish coded for sure.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. Yeah.
But Emily, you spoke about the union thing, and it's worth noting. We are still on strike. If we will be when this episode drops, it's anyone's guess, but we'll just see.
This episode is coming out in 2026. So
2026,
hopefully
so hopefully we won't be. But the union thing is interesting, because we talked about this, Emily, when we were recording our Wayne's World episode of all things, about how sort of back in 92 or back in the early 90s, you could have these anti-establishment movies put out by these massive corporations. Fucking Disney wouldn't put out a movie today that is about like striking and unions and like how you can beat the man. Like, it's crazy that this existed.
I was watching this with my husband Ian, who had no idea really what Newsies was or about. He got bored very quickly.
Sure.
Because it is kind of a boring movie.
It's a pretty boring movie.
It's a pretty boring movie for children. But I was like, okay, wait. When he got bored, I was like, I have to fast forward because you'll never guess who the Deus Ex Machina is at the end. You will never guess. And it was great.
You got a Roosevelt that just comes in and just like turns the whole thing upside down.
How many stories set in this period in New York use Theodore Roosevelt as like a Deus Ex Machina?
Is it
like,
Annie as well?
Annie
no,
does.
that's FDR.
Oh, FDR.
But the alienist is like, here's Teddy Roosevelt. And you're like, okay, I guess.
Because he's such a larger than life cultural figure. And he also, you know, that rule of animation where you're like, your animated character needs to be identifiable in profile. Teddy Roosevelt is just such a identifiable outline that like you could just have an actor. You don't even have to have someone be like, look, it's Teddy Roosevelt. You just have like the mustache and the glasses and people are on board. Like it's a piece of iconography, literally.
I mean, the other thing that this movie I didn't know is that was Pulitzer an asshole? Like, was Pulitzer notoriously
a rich man an asshole, Phil?
Well, I don't mean it like that. I just because our association with the name Pulitzer is with
the prize,
arguably the greatest or one of the best awards you can get in literature or in media, really. And so I just kind of, not that that's, I'm just dumb, I guess. I assumed that he wasn't a bad dude, but I guess
Alfred Nobel invented dynamite, my friend.
I have a bone to pick with the Pulitzers.
Wait. Can I do a little sidebar on Nobel?
Absolutely.
Because this is relevant to the Pulitzer Prize.
Sure.
Alfred Nobel made his fortune on dynamite. And he got sick or somehow, whatever. He thought that he was really close to death. And his obituary was published early. And the headline of the obituary was Merchant of Death. And then he didn't die. And he was like, well, shit, I don't want that to be my legacy. And so he endowed his name to a prize. So now instead of death, we associate him.
Good for him.
So maybe Oppenheimer should have just funded the Oppenheimer Awards. And that would have solved the movie.
It would have solved everything. If only Oppenheimer realized that if he had just made a prize for smart people, it would have all worked out.
And the Pulitzer Prize, for the record, was in the provisions in the will of Joseph Pulitzer. So it's like he didn't even do it in his life.
Yeah, no. Pulitzer and Hearst were like pretty famously
yellow journalism.
Yeah, they made journalism worse, and they didn't treat their employees well. Famous, I mostly know about this through newspaper comic strips, but like they would constantly like bounce between the two publishers because they could never like get enough money from one or the other. That's why they formed cartoon syndicates. I just am mad at the Pulitzers because I never won one.
There is
yet.
There is a very apocryphal story that is probably not true, but I do think sums up sort of the Hearst mentality. Yeah. Basically, when the Spanish-American War was going to start, you know, there were all these sensational stories about how bad the Spanish were in Cuba. Sure. And whatever the reporter that they sent down, or the artist or whatever, wrote back to Hearst to be like, it's all quiet in Cuba and there won't be a war. And allegedly Hearst wrote back, stay, you furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war.
Oh, Jesus.
Hell yeah. Let's listen.
Sells newspapers.
But I'll say that's the other thing about this movie too that I thought was interesting in terms of how like the Newsies are selling the papers, right? And they're basically spreading fake news. I hate to say that term, but to get people to buy the papers. So like there is sort of this spin that's happening at the various stages of media, even back then to some degree, in terms of how to get people to engage. You know, it's we were talking off mic, the three of us, about nonfiction before we started recording. That's part of it too, right? This idea of like making nonfiction feel like fiction and feel larger than life, and like that's how you get people to engage. And then on top of all of that, this is a musical, so like it's all dialed up to 11 with people just breaking into song. It's I don't know. I'm kind of convincing myself a little bit of how this movie could have been great. I'm not saying it is great. Emily and I talked about this a little bit. Emily doesn't like the songs. I think there's some bang.
I have been trying to remember a song from this movie this whole conversation, and literally all I can think of are songs from Oliver.
I'm the king of New York.
There you go.
Or what about Now is the time to seize the day? I could name like 5 songs.
Bunch of them.
Oh my god.
I mean,
I can only here's the thing. I can only name songs from Oliver.
Well,
and that is because
Oliver too many times.
when I was the age when I should have been watching Newsies, I instead was watching Oliver for some reason. So like that's just implanted in my brain. Listen, I think that my parents were so concerned I would turn into a gay boy that they accidentally turned me into a gay girl. So
I mean, it was going to happen one way or another, right?
Yeah, no, I think that like I just am like, why didn't I watch Newsies? And like the easy answer is I was forbidden from watching it because it might make me homosexual. So
or pro-union.
It could have just made, well, I mean, it could, I was going to be, you know, a homosexual pro-unionist either way.
Yeah.
But I mean disaster bisexual pro-unionist, let's be clear.
Go ahead, Emily.
Do you guys know the story about how Christopher Nolan, Jesus, Christian Bateman, I know, top of mind.
You mean Christian Bale?
I'm just gonna start again. I don't know what I'm doing.
What I do like is it starts as Christopher Nolan, then it turns into Jason Bateman.
Well, I think I was Patrick Batemaning.
Yes.
I was Patrick Batemaning.
Christian Bale. Yep.
Christian Bale. This is coffee. Christian Bale did not know that this was a musical when he was cast. They tricked him into starring in a musical.
I love it so much.
Which is so funny. And he hated talking about this movie. He hated this movie so much.
It is funny how, because if you think about where he is in the trajectory of the Christian Bale career, right? It's post Empire of the Sun, it's pre Little Women.
Yeah.
And he's just sort of, you know, he's still an adolescent, and I'm sure that like there's not a ton of roles necessarily. And this is a big Disney thing, and I'm sure they want to jam him in it no matter what. And by them, I mean his reps. But I do love that, like, he hates Santa Fe because of the dance scene that he has to do in it, which I think is kind of adorable.
He's not that good of a singer.
He's not a great, well, he's not a great dancer.
Ian wanted me to bring up this movie that I had never heard of and wasn't aware of, but was allegedly an important part of his childhood.
Okay.
Called Swing Kids, also starring a young Christian Bale.
There it is, Emily.
Swing Kids.
You know Swing Kids?
Emily keeps thinking Newsies is Swing Kids.
No, I can't.
Ian kept thinking that.
I thought Strictly Ballroom was Swing Kids.
Oh, sorry.
And
sorry.
I have a very good friend who's in Swing Kids. But also I watched it so for some reason the people in my like theater program in college were watching it, and I came in at the end, and the title card at the end said 45 swing kids died in World War II, and I started laughing.
Wait, it's like a pro.
No, it's
during Nazis, right?
Yeah,
like the Nazis dancers? Killed the swing kids, but like
I know, but 45 isn't that many comparatively.
Yeah, you know, and so I start laughing, and this woman like who was working in the office turns to me and is like, "People died." So that's why I just like Swing Kids holds this outsized place in my, as does Oliver, you know.
I mean, I guess as a Jewish person, out of like everyone that I'm supposed to have sympathy for during the Holocaust, like Nazi youth is not like the top of the list.
Correct.
I do. I mean, the Nazism affected everyone in Germany, and it's a horrible thing. But I'm like, that's what the movie's about. They don't like have a Jewish friend or anything.
I feel sad. I do feel sad in the abstract that 45 swing kids died in the Holocaust, because like that is a tragedy. It's you know, I feel like maybe there are other concerns that outweigh.
There should be.
That.
I also didn't know Christian Bale was in Swing Kids.
He is. He's the swing kid.
He is the titular swing kid, which I didn't know. So did you know
consider
that
yourself a friend.
Apparently, Robert Ebert gave it 1 star out of 4.
Swing Kids, yes.
Yeah.
He gave Newsies 1.5. So like he was not a fan of either of these movies.
He was not a fan of young Christian Bale.
It is interesting. So the Christian Bale thing is interesting because I do feel like it takes him a beat before anyone really kind of like, I know it's, I hate to say it, but like him getting Batman is what puts him on the map in a lot of ways, because I feel like he's in stuff.
What
like
about
he's in
American Psycho?
I do. Yeah, I feel like American
guess.
Or The
Psycho.
Machinist. You're skipping ahead.
Well, no, American Psycho is probably the right answer.
Yeah.
I only say he's in Little Women. People love him as Laurie. I think he's fine. I don't love that Little Women.
It's amazing. Best
I
Little
love
Women.
that little. No,
Best
it's
Little
not the
Women.
best, but it's
not
the second best.
It's whatever. It's fine. And then he's in Portrait of a Lady. He's in Velvet Goldmine, which I remember him in that. He's in Midsummer Night's Dream. American Psycho is certainly the moment when people are like, he's a man now. Because I think everyone was like, he's a boy. And then he shows up in American Psycho.
He is a man in that.
He is a man now. And then it's Laurel Canyon, which I love. Reign of Fire, which no one's seen.
Oh, that's fucking great. I love Reign of Fire.
Reign of Fire is great. And then it's Batman Begins, and then like he's off to the races. But I just think it's interesting that he has this.
I've never seen Empire of the Sun.
Good movie.
I know. Good. I bet it would be.
Yeah,
not to like
written by Tom Stoppard.
Correct.
Not to like drag us off on a tangent yet again, but I really don't want to talk about Newsies.
Well, we're gonna have to at some point, Emily.
Are you gonna talk about how Gloria Steinem was his stepmom?
No, that's cool though. I was thinking
cool.
I think now that Christian Bale is Christian Bale, it's time for him to go back to musicals, and it's time for him to star in the film version of Natasha Pierre in The Great Comet of 1812 as Pierre.
He would be a great
beard.
Pierre.
He'd be amazing.
He would be a great Pierre.
Instead of just wearing like the padding, he would actually gain the weight. It would be wonderful. He'd win his second Oscar. Christian, let's make this movie once the strike's over.
I have been in love with Christian Bale ever since he voiced Howl in Howl's Moving Castle.
Sure. That was the moment for you?
Well, that was one of the many moments. I'm a big Christian Bale not that he needs defending. I like
Christian Bale. He doesn't.
No, again, I'm saying not that he needs even defending. Yeah. I'm a Christian Bale stan.
Sure.
I'm an evangelical Christian, if you will.
Wow.
In 2000, before he took American Psycho, his dad was married to Gloria Steinem, and she said, "Don't do this role because it's bad. It's misogynistic." Yeah. And he's like, "Well, I got it because I need people to see me as a man," and he did it anyway. And I would argue that the book is misogynistic, but actually because the movie is directed by a woman, that it finds humor
by a woman too. Yeah. She adapted it with it. Yeah.
So I actually think that he made the right choice. I hate the book and love the movie.
The thing about the 94 Little Women is I really strongly identify with Amy in that movie because Kirsten Dunst was my girl.
Yeah.
So like I was like, if I just play the long game, I'm going to land Christian Bale in the end. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm playing the long game. It's going to happen for me.
Yeah.
When did you turn into Samantha Mathis is the question.
I've always that's the twist. I've always been Samantha Mathis. So
it's I don't dislike Christian Bale. I really think he's a very talented actor. I appreciate a lot of the swings he's taken. I guess I just sort of, there's something about him that I can't fully lock into, and I don't know what that is. Anyway.
Is it that maybe for me it's that I want to put my face on his face.
You want to kiss his lips?
His little
lips?
Curvity lips. Yeah. That does help elevate everything he does.
He is very charming in this movie. I'm going to give a little bit of a context to this movie. Emily's favorite movie.
Just real quick though,
oh God,
if I got married to Christian Bale, how do you think he would like go method for our wedding? Like, would he put on weight? Would he take off weight? Would he like grow facial hair?
That's interesting.
Oh yeah, no, I think he would shave. I think he would be.
I think he'd shave. I think he might have a glass eye like he does in Amsterdam.
Oh, that'd be great. I want him to do some prop comedy at our wedding. Christian, if you're listening.
He'll have a cane, probably. That's my guess.
Do some pratfalls.
Do some pratfalls. Context for Newsies. In this musical, homeless New York City newsboy Jack Cowboy Kelly, played by Christian Bale, befriends two newcomers who is trade brothers David and Les Jacobs. When publisher Joseph Pulitzer, played by Robert Duvall, sets new rules that make it harder for the young newspaper salesman to make a buck, the boys go on strike. Brian Denton, played by Bill Pullman, a journalist who's sympathetic to their plight, gives them some tips in public relations as the newsboys' battle grips the city. Newsies open on April 8th. 1992 against Sleepwalkers, Basic Instinct, White Men Can't Jump, Beethoven, and, as always, The Mighty Ducks. It would go on to make $2.8 million on a $15 million budget, just 39% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics, 88% from audiences. Roger Ebert gave the film 1.5 stars and said, "What I find hard to believe is that anyone thought the screenplay based on these actual events was of compelling interest." Newsies is like warmed over Horatio Angler, or Agler, that is. Whatever. Alger. Complete with such indispensable cliches as the newsboy on crutches, the little kid, and of course the hero's best pal who has a pretty sister. I mean, I get it. I'm not saying that this is like script wise a particularly good movie, but are most musical scripts like they're kind of just coat hanger for you to hang songs on?
I totally agree. I think actually the problem with this movie isn't that there is like that the story's not interesting.
Yes.
I think it's just kind of a poorly paced movie.
Yes.
I think it's like boring.
It's too long.
It's too long.
Yeah. In stage musical terms, it has a bad book. It
has a bad book.
Yes. Yes.
And I actually think in the stage production, they make certain tweaks to make it go faster, to like heighten some tension, because they recognize like, oh, this is just kind of a slog. But the songs are so joyful and Christian Bale is so good. And you can't tell me that David Jacobs isn't Jewish coded, because he is David Jacobs.
That family is pretty Jewish coded.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I mean, the thing that really hit me as I hit play on this movie is that, like, conceptually, I understand why they thought this was a good idea. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that the idea of Newsies as a musical makes sense, right? Like, in terms of these kids and in terms of, like, their plight, and it's got this kind of Dickensian kind of vibe to it. Like, I understand all these things. It's just, as you said, Dana, like, the pacing is kind of brutal, and it doesn't, it lurches towards its songs as opposed to like feeling as though there's propulsion. It's unfortunate.
If I could, I feel like I could edit a half hour out of this movie and make it a lot better.
Totally. Yeah.
I watched Act 1 of the stage show, which is on Disney Plus, and I had a much better time. Like, the movie like has a lot of stage musical conventions for no particular reason. Like the Anne Margaret character is like, you would have, this is the person you have in a stage musical to win you the featured actress in a musical Tony, and there's no good reason to have her in a movie.
She should have been pulled.
Because there's a different convention on stage where that sort of thing perks up, you know, the end of Act 1 or whatever.
Because you get a diva who could sort of like interact with the audience a little bit. Like, it doesn't, the character doesn't work in a movie. You're like, why is this person here?
She doesn't, she serves no purpose whatsoever in the film. It's also unclear as to like what her establishment is. Like, it seems kind of like a bordello. It seems a little bit like it could be like these are women, but it's also like kind of,
well, Phil, they are women. They are women. I want to be
they
clear
are
about
women.
that.
Sorry. But yeah, it's got this kind of, I don't know. It's got a bit of a sketchy
It's like a burlesque club.
Burlesque is the right way to put it.
I think that's what it is.
But also just like, why are these guys there? Like, why are these kids there? It doesn't matter. There is a part of me that feels also like she's a little bit, this movie has a little bit of Les Mis in it. And I don't mean to suggest like that it's even remotely close, but like she has kind of a master of the house. Like, it could have been that, like if they dialed her up and made Anne Margaret into something a little bit more dynamic, but instead she's just kind of there.
And also they make Hearst, I would say, like those villain scenes of him are just so dull. And
Duvall's going for it though. He is chewing the fucking scenery, but it is, yes.
Do you think this movie or the Les Mis movie is a better movie? Because I think they're kind of equally not great.
I'd agree that they're equally not great, but I would, that's tough. Because like, I'd say that what I like about both of them is the same thing, which is some of the songs. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sorry, which
movie's better?
I think Les Mis is a better movie because Les Mis is more like I think Les Mis is a better movie by far. I know that people have problems with it, but I'm like, the Les Mis songs are just so powerful that it just carries you through.
That's where I would lean toward Les Mis too, but it's because I listened to that Broadway musical soundtrack a billion times as a kid, and like, but like I think the songs, especially the well-performed ones, I think Tom Hooper's every directorial decision in that movie is kind of a disaster.
Correct.
But putting his camera right in the face of, for instance, Anne Hathaway ends up working really well. So and the songs are great. There's some great,
and also
songs.
Just, I mean, the thing about Les Mis, and it's the problem. I mean, listen, it's unfair to compare these two things because one is a Disney movie that isn't striving for the same.
And it's really unfair to compare them to Oliver. Go ahead.
Correct. I agree.
I do love Oliver.
It's great. The thing about Les Mis too is just like the richness in terms of the character arcs and in terms of like the complexity of what they're going through. What I do respect about Newsies is that like there is some stuff there that I think is interesting. Like I do think that Jack's character does go through a bunch of shit. The problem ultimately is that it takes too long to kind of get there. Like when he does become a quote unquote turncoat and gets in bed with Pulitzer, it's so late in the movie that I'm just like, I need this to happen at the midway point, not 2/3 through. It's so I don't know.
And also what I do think the musical does a little better is I think bringing Santa Fe up earlier, at least as a reprise, like, and then giving it the reprise is like it establishes Jack as having a perspective. Mm-hmm. Like we care about this person. He has a dream. He has something he wants to do. And then at the end, it's a journey when it's like, is he given that choice? No, he's going to stay in you.
Which also folds into, I do think this movie is about the haves and have-nots. It's about class. It's about sort of the rich versus the poor. And I do think that inserting that into the relationship between Jack and David and Les is interesting, right? Like Jack seeing David's family and seeing like what a family is and what all that stuff is good. Like, again, it's not as though this movie isn't striving to, it's checking boxes in terms of like interesting ideas. It's just, I really do think it's just all in the pacing. And I think that Ortega, who directs this, is clearly more interested in the musical set pieces than he is in the other stuff, which is also a problem too.
Every time
and the choreography, it's very interesting athletic boy choreography, which I love.
Sure.
I mean, I think what he gets exceptionally good at, as you can see with High School Musical, is character archetypes that teens will fall in love with, and also choreography that looks young and athletic and fun. Yep. Like I think so much of the traditional choreography of musicals comes from this Fosse tradition, which is very like staid and controlled and like precise, and it's impressive. Sure. But because Ortega's excellent with young people, he creates this very like youthful, vibrant dancing that feels fun.
And the movie does really come alive every time a bunch of boys are dancing. That's when I'm like really gripped by it, because it's just so clearly what he's most interested in, and he shoots dance
numbers. Guys, I have
pretty
a phone
well.
Call that I have to take very quickly. I am so sorry.
Phil's gonna solve the strike.
Yeah, Phil, is this the strike? Is it over?
Phil's fixing the strike.
Hey, how are you?
How are you?
Leave all this in, Ernie. Just put all this in the show.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I like that he spun his chair around like he should be chomping a cigar. No, don't mute it. We want to hear you.
No. How you doing, Dana?
I'm good. How are you? What's going on in your life?
You know, I got a baby. The baby's in daycare. I'm weirdly like very busy with work, even though I'm on strike, because I have a book I'm working on, and I sold some.
Oh, what's the book?
It's a novel called Woodworking. It's out January 2025.
Oh my God, that's so exciting.
Yeah. So, but I'm, just kind of working on stuff that's not my normal job.
What's the book about?
It is about, leave all this in, Ernie. It's perfect. It's about two trans women in Mitchell, South Dakota, a high school teacher who has just come out, and the only other trans woman she knows is her student, and they form a friendship, and stuff happens. It's set during the 2016 election, so as you can imagine, only good things happen.
Wow, yeah, that is a challenging period of time.
Yes, exactly.
That's so exciting.
What are you up to?
It's slow decay, bed rot, I believe the kids call it. No, I am. I mostly do my podcast, which is weekly and requires a lot of work. Then, in theory, I'm working on a kids book, a history kids book, very slowly. And then I'm working on the human project of being a person, which is taking more work for me than I think most other people naturally are able to do.
Listen, I'm right there with you. I sometimes struggle to just stay upright. So it's tough. The thing that I perfected just in my day-to-day life is having conversations with people that sound like I'm asking them to plug things on my podcast. Yep. So what's your favorite recent episode of your podcast that I should listen to and our listeners should listen to?
This is all staying in the podcast?
I'm telling Ernie to keep it in because we heard part of Phil's phone call and I want to hear the rest of it. I want people to hear that too. So
yeah, that was great. I mean, the most recent episode, as of now, this recording is about Napoleon and the Black Count, which is the nickname that's been given to Thomas Alexander Dumas, who is Alexander Dumas' father, who was the highest ranking person of color in the French military in the late 1700s, and just was this incredible soldier. And his story, I think, is like a great window into the question of what race was like at the end of the 18th century, before the French Revolution and after it. And then he basically just runs afoul of Napoleon, and Napoleon really ruins his career. And then he gets imprisoned accidentally, and they don't really make moves to get him free. And Napoleon becomes emperor, and spoiler alert, reinstitutes slavery in the French colonies, even though that had been banned during the French Revolution. And it's just, I think a fun story, because it's sort of this like swashbuckling story about a soldier, and also a window into the racial politics of the Napoleonic era.
Yeah. Just to be clear, we will heavily edit this because it is, but I want to leave some of it in because I think we're having a good time.
You do not have to. I'm just telling you, I hope you listen.
Yeah, listen. It's a good show. What's your favorite musical? What musicals do you love most?
I love Sweeney Todd.
Oh, fuck yeah. How do you feel about the movie?
Not great. I mean, it's fun to like see it, and I'm not as much of a, Tim Burton hater as some people, but the movie's not good. Like, I don't defend the movie, but I enjoy it, I think, more than most, just because I really like the musical. I had sort of mixed feelings about the new Broadway revival.
Okay. I didn't get to see it when I was in New York. I hoped to, but the tickets were just crazy. So I went to the opera instead, which was an experience.
Oh, the opera. Which opera?
I saw The Magic Flute, which is, I guess, it's the first time I ever went to the opera. It's like baby's first opera, The Magic Flute.
It's great.
It was very fun. I had a blast. And
I'm very sorry about that, guys.
No, listen, we kept the
we're
chatter
talking about
going.
The opera. We're very sophisticated.
Yeah, we're leaving this all in, Phil.
Oh, sounds great. That was Esty about my Taylor Swift ticket, so I had to.
No,
I had to.
Esty just called you on the phone.
She did.
Bragging.
Okay, wait. What's the update? You have to tell us, and then we cut this out.
We're definitely cutting this out.
No, this is all staying in. Ernie, keep this in.
She said that it looks like it'll be the 9th that she gets me a ticket for. So unfortunately, Dana, you will be out of the country. Dana's just so upset. I don't know what to tell you.
Are you you should take me.
It looks like the 9th, but this is why I feel bad, because like I have a ticket for Saturday. So like, am I really gonna, and like Esty bought these tickets and they're not for me. She just bought a bunch of tickets. And I'm just like, am I gonna like take one of these tickets? It just all feels weird to me. So I don't know.
Oh,
give me the ticket. I'll take it. I saw the show in New York, but
I know you did. The only thing that has me wanting to like maybe buy the ticket from her is because it's the last night of the tour, and I feel like something's gonna happen on the 9th, and I'm like, anyway. So whatever, we'll see.
Is she cool? Can we arrange that I get to meet her?
Sure.
Can we hang out?
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. She's great. Yeah.
Which of your friends is she dating?
She isn't dating him anymore, which is why things are even weirder right now. That's why like there was drama. She broke up with him, and I kind of inserted myself into this, and now I'm like, how do I become friends with Esty? And it's a whole thing. Yeah.
Which of your friends did she break up with? We will cut this, but I'm just curious.
Oh, you haven't met him. His name's Federico.
Christian Bale.
It's Christian Bale, weirdly. Yeah, Bale. No, I mean she is the nicest person in the world. She's super lovely, and that's why I don't want to like, be a dick. So
she was on the pod. I like to think that we vibed. I feel like
she's great. She talked Aladdin with us. It was wonderful. She's lovely. I just felt like when she was like, I don't know, when the show was before the night that I had a ticket, I kind of was able to maybe be like, I got this last minute ticket, and what, like now it would be, I feel like it'd be tricky for me to do that.
A little tricky because you're like, I've already gone and I'm coming back.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
I will buy the ticket from you for $100 American dollars.
$100.
100 100 Canadian dollars, if that's how you want to say.
So less.
I'll
So
figure out the
less.
exchange rate. I'll pay you like $97 or whatever it is.
But here's another thing: if there was a universe where you could go backstage,
this is the thing. I just have to I gotta figure it out. Yeah. My feeling is ultimately I know how this is going to shake out, which is I'm going to go to the show on Saturday. I'll text her next week and be like, I'd love to come, but I'm not going to make a thing out of this. And if you have other people you want to give the tickets to, I totally get it. But I'd also buy the ticket.
Like Emily St. James and Dana, just stay home from wherever you're going.
Okay.
Dana's going overseas. It'd be tough.
Going overseas.
So now let's get back to Newsies, guys. Back to Newsies. Emily's favorite topic.
We were just chatting favorite musicals, and Phil,
we
that
were.
feels like a thing.
What are your favorite musicals? Let's do that.
I love Sweeney Todd, but I had very mixed feelings on the revival. But I love Sweeney Todd.
What were they?
Your mixed feelings.
I think Josh Groban has a beautiful voice. I don't know if he captured the menace that I would want. People are like, well, he played it sad, and I'm like, okay, well, that's great. That's not how I prefer my Sweeney. It's a character decision. It is. God bless him. He's good at what he does. It's just I guess I prefer a little more like Grand Guignol theatrics and a little more fright from my Sweeney Todd.
What's your favorite movie musical?
Oh, I mean,
that's interesting.
Oliver might be up there. Singing in the Rain.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Singing in the Rain. Yeah. What about you, Phil? Or you, Emily?
Well, Emily, you go first because I feel like you're more of a musical
I do love Singing in the Rain. Weirdly, I love My Fair Lady, which I think is one of those movies I watched a ton as a kid that just got imprinted in me. There's been a real recent swing of musicals, and I think my favorite of those is In the Heights. I really enjoyed that movie.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I loved is Steven Spielberg's West Side Story.
So good. It was so good.
I loved it. I loved it.
I don't know if this counts, but I think it counts. But Moulin Rouge was a really big movie for me in 2001 and still is.
Definitely counts.
Yeah, I mean, and I was the lead in some musicals at summer camp. So
what was your best? What was your best role?
My best performance?
Yeah.
I think it might have been Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
You're getting
I didn't know you could sing. How did we go this long without knowing?
It's not something that I talk about much, Dana.
Yeah, maybe you should.
Well, I was Joseph, and I was also 15-year-old me was Jean Valjean, which is not something that should be, There's a video of it somewhere that
this is why Phil, you were the straight boy in musical theater.
Yeah.
You must have had some pretty cute girlfriends.
I might have at summer camp. I certainly did. But it was it was a weird thing because in my teens I was into that stuff, and I was in drama class in high school and all of that. But musicals kind of got away from me a little bit, and I veered more towards the writing side of things, and got away from wanting in any way to be the center of attention in that way. So there's a swath of musicals probably in the mid 90s where I'm just kind of don't really know them. I saw Chicago and London with BB Newirth, which was amazing. But I can't speak to seeing a ton of musical theater, unfortunately.
Let's do a musical episode. I can sing, you can sing. It can happen.
Everything.
Let's go. We'll sing the whole episode.
Every time I go to New York or London, I try to make a point of seeing what I can. The best thing I felt about working for EW back in New York was that I got tickets to everything. Yeah. I'm an unabashed musical theater obsessive. Yeah, I think that is also why I have more forgiveness for Newsies, because when the songs come in, it just really gets me.
Yeah, I'm going to drag us vaguely back on topic here.
Well, I was going to drag us there too. In a second.
No, listen, Phil, I am good at my job.
I'm kidding.
One of the things I find interesting about Newsies and Les Mis, another show we've discussed a lot, is musical theater is the ideal form in which to portray some form of collective action, whether it's a revolution, whether it's a labor strike, because you got a bunch of people working in unison, presenting a big number, and you get to hear their individual voices within it, but also you get the one day more where they all come together at the end, and it's the greatest thing ever.
And I think it speaks to, sorry, just to agree with that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think it speaks to like the feeling of empowerment that comes with singing in a group. It's why like labor chants work, because people love chant. It's really powerful to like chant together. So like a group singing together in unison is really powerful. Yeah.
That said, and this is not a new point I'm making here, but the fact that you require so much money inherently to stage a musical, whether on stage or on screen, makes it inherently a like product of the upper class. So it's sort of like an upper class cosplay of like lower class movements, and like that disparity has always been fascinating because like I love Hamilton. Who does, Hamilton's a great show, but also like it became this like political thing when it's, this thing of like, oh, good, we're going to, fight back against Trump or whatever, when like it is inherently of the same, it's inherently coming from an economic class that is not interested in disrupting the status quo in any way. So I've always been fascinated by the divide between those two things. And like, I think that is kind of expressed in Newsies, where it is like in theory, pro-labor, but it's also made by the Walt Disney Corporation, so it like pulls its punches here and there,
Although I totally agree, and I do think that people who think that like Hamilton is the answer to anything aside more than just like a great musical are deluding themselves. I will say I do think it is quietly revolutionary that in the 90s the Walt Disney Corporation made a musical in which a group of children say, we're a union. The heroes are a union going on a labor strike. Like that simple fact alone, that children are watching a movie where people recognize the power of collective action, is huge. I mean, how many movies have strikers as the heroes?
It's also like
Hoffa.
Well, I mean, but children's movies.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, The Little Mermaid, she strikes against being a mermaid, but I think that it's sort of another movie I'm thinking of, or musical I'm thinking a lot about in terms of this is like Rent, which I have a lot of problems with, but it is very much about trying to capture this moment and this like kind of movement. And the fun thing about Rent has been that like the opinion of everyone swayed toward why they should just fucking pay their rent, and now it's like, but landlords are bad, rent is good. And like the content of the show hasn't changed at all, but inherently these things get co-opted by the ruling class, but also that's just fucking capitalism. Anyway, Phil,
I do want to
solve capitalism.
I was gonna say, as you were talking, something occurred to me as well. That occurred to me as I was watching the film too, which is, and this might sound strange, but extras. The amount of people in some of the movies that we've seen thus far, Emily, is pretty crazy. And as we know, extras are very expensive. To have these big, wide shots where you'll have like hundreds and hundreds of extras it goes so far, to your point, both of you, of like feeling all of these bodies and feeling this movement and seeing this revolution. And there's a shot in Newsies where I was like, God damn, that's an expensive shot to have all those people there. But you need it to convey what you guys are talking about. It's the same thing in Malcolm X as well. There's that beautiful shot of the Joe Louis after he wins, Joe Louis after he wins, and you're just like, you need to feel this collective. You need to feel all these people, and we don't fucking do that anymore because it's all CG bullshit. So you're never feeling like it's real people, and it's a bummer. It's why, as Emily loves, Babylon, for instance, is a movie where you had a lot of extras. You had these big shots. Yes, Emily, you look like you have something to say about that.
Bill, the other day you said on Twitter that Babylon was a bad movie, and I appreciated that it was Emily bait, and you were trying to get me to reply, and I didn't say anything because I don't zeet on X anymore.
Emily, you and I are 100% on the same page. It's an amazing movie.
Yeah,
continue, Phil.
But now I'm talking about on the podcast. Yeah,
I was definitely. It was a little bit of Emily bait. I wanted to see whether or not you would come out of the woodwork, and you didn't, which I found interesting.
It's because Elon chased me away.
Elon did with his giant axe. I'll just say this, and I don't want to get into a whole Babylon thing. I don't hate Babylon, as I've made clear to you, Emily. I think there's actually
I need to put a minute on the clock. Do I need to put a minute?
We really don't. I'll just say this. I want to watch it again. Excuse me, I sneezed. I want to watch it again. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. We'll see where I land, in future years as I continue to watch this movie.
You got to see it in 70 millimeter in a movie theater.
Maybe
I will go with you.
But I would love to talk. I would. This pertains to you, Dana, a little bit, because Howard Ashman was supposed to work on this.
Yeah.
He unfortunately, as we all know, got sick with AIDS and ultimately died on March 14th, 1991, which was close to around the time that they were working on this. We talked about him a little bit on the Aladdin episode, Emily. He obviously worked a little bit on some of those songs too. So this is all around the time, unfortunately, when he passes away. So there's a bunch of projects that sort of had his fingerprints on.
I think he could have whipped this movie into shape.
Yes.
I think
If
so
there
too.
was one thing that Howard Ashman was great at, it was getting in and cutting through the bullshit and instituting a clear and effective story structure. I mean, you can't say that Little Shop of Horrors isn't like the most efficient musical they've ever made.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a shame, and I mean, one of the many human tragedies of his death is that he would have had so much art left to give.
Oh my God! What we've been deprived of his art is truly heartbreaking, and I think about how the guy that Menken brings in is Jack Feldman, who I don't know his work particularly well. I don't know if Emily or Dana, you guys do,
No.
but he's brought in, and I just can't imagine filling those shoes either,
Well,
right? Like,
I would argue that Howard Ashman was effective. I think the guy they brought in is a excellent lyricist, and the lyrics of these songs are fun and smart, snarky, and silly, and they're perfect. I like the lyrics of Newsies. What I think that Howard Ashman did with his projects was that he was also a creative force to structure and shape the movie, and he used the songs to move the story forward. I mean, think about like Belle in Beauty and the Beast. And so I think actually Howard's biggest impact on Newsies, and this is completely idealized thinking, like we have no, whatever, is that he would have shaped the story in a way that made it more efficient.
I think I was listening to the lyrics throughout this movie and was just like, these are good, like first, second draft lyrics. Like they're really sharp. But I just was like, they're like, Ashman was so good at wordplay. He was so good at like little twists of phrase. And as Dana said, he was amazing at story structure. Like he made Aladdin what it is in a way that like he was kind of merciless about killing his darlings, if you will. And yeah, this movie really needed that touch. It needed like a more fleet touch with both the storytelling and the lyrics. I just looked up Jack Feldman. He's won 3 awards. He's won a Tony and he's won 2 Razzies. He won a Razzie for this movie for the song, for the Anne Margaret song, which honestly I can't argue isn't the worst original song of that year. Is a bad song. And then he won a Tony, he won a Razzie for Thumbelina in 1995 for a song called Mary the Mole. And I think based on that, we just need to watch Thumbelina.
I like Thumbelina.
What did he win really a Tony for?
Newsies.
He won the Tony for Newsies. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's funny that he won the Razzie and the Tony for Newsies.
Because Newsies comes out in the same year as the stage musical of Once, which is really beautiful. And Once wins Best Musical, but Newsies wins Best Score because the Once score was ineligible because they only used songs from the movie. And Menken and Feldman wrote a bunch of new songs for Newsies. And that's why Alan Menken has an EGOT, because he got his Tony for the Newsies stage musical.
I wanted to note that this is the lowest grossing live action movie from Walt Disney Pictures, at least theatrically. We don't know what it did. Ultimately, I'm sure it did fine on various other formats. The other thing that's worth noting is that there was some behind the scenes drama with this movie because Christian Bale and Elle Keats, who plays Sarah Jacobs, were dating and broke up during the duration of filming. I
mean, that's a fucking classic musical theater thing. That happens all the time. That happened with you and your girlfriend, Phil, as we all know.
Several times. It's in fact, they broke up the day before they had their big scene together.
No.
I can't imagine what it was like on set that day. Could not have been fun. But they're kind of electric. Like their big scene is the scene on the roof.
Sure.
But like they have real chemistry. And you can tell that these two are super into each other. Like it has that vibe of just being a teenager and just like, I don't know, it really works. I think it's one of the things that really works in this movie. So this is kind of amazing. so Mencken was talking. So Max Casella, I believe is how you say the actor's name. He he had this great quote where he said he went to see a movie, and the trailer for Newsies played. And he said, I'll never forget the trailer ends, and some guy sitting in front of me leaned over to someone next to him and said, man, Disney's really gone down the tubes. Which I think is amazing.
That's so funny.
I also love that Mencken remembers going to breakfast with Katzenberg at the Four Seasons in LA and saying to Katzenberg, what are we going to do? And he said, Mencken, I could throw $10 million up in the air right now on Doheny. Just throw it in the air. It would do just as much good. This movie's DOA.
You know, when you said it was the worst performing movie in the history of Disney, I was like, well, there has to be a qualifier. There's no way it did worse than the Gnome-mobile. It did worse than the Gnome-mobile. The Gnome-mobile made $4 million domestic in the 60s, which is like 700,000 million today.
I mean, this is, I think, one of the reasons that this movie has become something of a cult classic. One, because it just played on Disney Channel all the time, and so we just sort of grew up with it in osmosis. But it's a deeply uncool movie. It's a lame movie. Musicals, by just their very structure, are lame because they're earnest and like all musicals are a little embarrassing. And this is just like, it's such a lame movie that it's like a period piece and it's like a bunch of boys. Like it's embarrassing. And I understand why Christian Bale didn't like it.
Like it's so uncool.
That's another thing, like collective action, like having been involved in WGA pickets and stuff, and like watching the rise of leftist movements around the world is lame because you have to get super earnest. You have to be like, we are fighting for what's right. And I go out there and do chants with people, and I'm like, God, this is weird. Why am I doing this? I'm not cool. I'm too cool for this, you know. And but it is like, I think that's
I hate chanting. I do. Yeah. I don't like when they have you chant. I'm like, I want to listen to my little podcast.
The chanting's tough because it feels like I get just kind of cringy. It just feels kind of like maybe what it was like to be on the set of Newsies, where you're just like, okay, I guess I have to do this, but I don't really want to. I don't know. I'll hold a sign. I'll pick it all day long. Don't make me say your chants. Also, the megaphones are so loud. Everything about it is just a little bit too much for me. But little piece of, yes, go ahead.
I have stopped like using I if I have a friend there, I'll walk with them and talk with them. But I have increasingly I just like listening to music and just walking by myself. It's nice.
Haven't gone.
Nice.
This is the thing. I agree with you. I've often thought about going alone. I haven't actually gone. I've gone alone and then met and just like had friends there and then just started chatting or whatever.
You just know too many people.
Well, all right. A little piece of trivia that I love is that this film was released on Joseph Pulitzer's 145th birthday.
Happy birthday, Mr. Pulitzer.
Birthday, Mr. Pulitzer. Okay,
Christian Bale should have popped out of a cake.
So Carrying the Banner rips, the first song, I think is great. Where we see all the Newsies and they're brushing their teeth and they're showering and they're getting ready for their day and they're talking about how they carry the banner. I think that song is great.
It's so cute. They're razzing each other.
They're razzing each other, and it ends with a clip that I posted on Twitter because it was fucking amazing. There's some little redheaded kid, and at the end of the song, he goes, "These are for the Newsies," and he says it in like some crazy like 20s, 30s voice, and I'm just like, I love that these are like kids, but they're good actors, and they're all kind of having fun leaning into these kind of odd, antiquated tropes. I don't know, like you've got a kid on crutches talking like Bugsy Malone, like it's all just bizarre. I love it. Anyway, whatever. That's just me. I think Santa Fe is kind of lame, but it is what it is. I don't know. It's kind of, it's his want song, so I understand why it's important. But I also kind of feel like
a restaurant in Santa Fe.
I know it's very funny that Rent also has a Santa Fe,
and that's a better song. So I don't know. My problem is I first saw this movie in 2020, and I saw it on a Zoom. I saw it on a Zoom stream with a bunch of other trans people, and they were just like all having a blast, and I was just like, "What is this?"
You have to. watch it for the first time as an 11-year-old on Disney Channel.
Yeah.
I watched it.
Really sing.
I watched it with my baby, and they seemed into it. So I may have created a Newsies fan. You never know.
And your baby loved Wayne's World as well. For what
the baby is getting very into the cinema and the show Bluey. Those are the things the baby likes.
I do think it's interesting, Dana, when we were talking about the Howard Ashman of it all, and how obviously he was the guy that kind of coined the phrase "the want song," right? Like that is. Why it's so important for Ariel's character, why it's so important. And it feels like it's such a mainstay now in specifically Disney musicals, but just it's pretty amazing to think about. Like if they took one big lesson from Howard Ashman, it was they all gotta have a fucking one song. Like it's pretty amazing.
I would argue that this is like not a super successful want song because it's like it doesn't really inform the rest of his character. The movie isn't about him going to Santa Fe.
He has a chance at the end, and then he says "fuck it," and he turns around. You
know, like Little Mermaid is about her trying to become a human. You know, she wants more. And Beauty and the Beast is about her going to find an adventure. Like this isn't about a guy actually getting away from being a newsie. It's about him becoming more entrenched in being a newsie.
What if halfway through this movie he had a meeting with Pulitzer, and Pulitzer said, give me your voice and I'll make you a cowboy. And then like he was just walking around mute through the rest of the movie dressed as a cowboy.
I mean, would watch. I agree with you, Dana. His want is muddy because part of it is I want a family. But part of it is I want to get the hell out of Dodge. And part of it is I don't really want to be a leader. But part of it is, but I need to be a leader because otherwise, like, I agree with you. It's not nearly clear enough as to like what he wants. But, listen, there are people
they try to fix that a little bit in the musical by establishing it early and then changing his want. But it's just, I like the song Santa Fe. I find it very wholesome and sweet, but it doesn't really it's the character arc that I have a problem with, not the songs.
If you like drill down on the thing where he wants a family, then him finding a family in this group of people, like that could be, he wants the contact high of the Jacobs family.
Yeah.
But then actually his family is the Newsies. Like that could work. It's just like, also he wants to move, but has he looked at Zillow? It's just
it's really funny because I do think that so much of the movie kind of comes down to this thing because there's that lack of understanding our protagonist's goals and desires hurts the propulsion of it as well, right? Because like you don't have a character that you're like, okay, I know what he wants, and then you're also like, what do the Newsies want? And the Newsies just want to be paid fairly, which is fine, but like kind of a tough thing to be excited about as an audience member, which is another reason why you don't see a lot of union movies, which is that it's tough to it's all really hard. Like this is not an easy movie to do, and I kind of feel like they just stepped on some landmines along the way.
Yeah.
I think like the thing is like you need to have a Norma Ray. You need to have someone who's finally pushed too far, who organizes everybody. And the thing is like the historical record. This is the thing. I watched this movie again, obviously for the show, and I had a pretty good time until I read the Wikipedia page. And the actual leader of the strike was a one-eyed young man named Louis Belletti, nicknamed Kid Blink, who spoke with a heavy Brooklyn accent that was often phonetically transcribed when he was quoted by newspapers.
Kid Blink.
You want this movie to be about Kid Blink, and I understand why Disney would not make a movie about Kid Blink and like maybe not have a musical with a guy who has a heavy Brooklyn accent just breaking into song. But like he started this strike because of the unfair conditions and the way he felt mistreated. And it's just like in this movie, Jack becomes a strike leader kind of incidentally, and it's his character arc, but also it doesn't feel like it follows organically from anything he established about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because Kid Blink is in this film, and he is the kid that is the head of the Brooklyn crew.
When all the boroughs come together, how do you not? I love it.
It's Emily has no heart.
The problem with this movie really is the pacing, because like that moment should be such a big moment, and you're like, well, what point in the movie does it come in? It just is wrong, but it's so good. The moments individually are so excellent.
I love that the actor's name who plays Kid Blink is Trey Parker, and I like to think that it is Trey Parker.
Yeah, probably.
What if it is?
But I totally agree with you, Dana, that like it's so funny because if the three of us, and we're not going to do this, but if the three of us sat down and like actually put on a board the big kind of plot points in this movie, they're all there. It's just they're executed not perfectly, and getting to them feels like it's kind of this weird lurching kind of, it's just the pacing and the momentum is so off that you're not hitting these beats hard enough emotionally. And then I also have to say too, like the end of this film is also a little bit like there's a lot of stuff that gets jammed into the third act of this movie as well, where it's like you have Jack who's convinced by Pulitzer to join, and the evil people, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. And then the Newsies are upset with Jack for having turned on them. But then it all kind of, how does it all play out where it's like, there's this, oh my God, there's all sorts of like convoluted things about like, there's the police chief, and then there's the guy who runs the orphanage.
The abusive orphanage because they're getting a kickback.
Right. Yeah. Right. So there's all these like weird bureaucratic things that are going on that you're just like, no one cares about these things.
Well, and Teddy Roosevelt cares about these things.
Yes. But like, it's crazy to me that the third act of this movie is about like bureaucratic red tape and like how corrupt the police system is. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, it's all just a lot.
Newsies is a David Simon show. This is what ultimately it comes down to.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like the Jack and Pulitzer scene, the scene between Christian Bale and Robert Duvall, like these are two great actors, and you can sense that they're both like, are we okay? I guess we're gonna give this our all, even though like it's not deserving of this. But it's a good scene, and Duvall's giving it all his all, and then like the Newsies are shocked and upset when Jack is working for them, and then like the brothers are attacked by the evil henchmen of Pulitzer, and then like somehow they get a fucking printing press that he just leaves in someone's basement. And no one hears them using this printing press.
No, they're allowed to have their own printing press. Actually, it's good. And they have ink and paper. That's they can do
crazy.
It. Read the fucking First Amendment, Phil. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, they can do what they want. I think that actually, if given the pieces of Newsies, if someone was like, okay, here are these songs in isolation, and here are these characters. Not to be arrogant, but I think starting from scratch, I could write a better Newsies. Like, I do think this sort of feels like just if we're like, okay, let's just like start from scratch and like take these songs and you listen to these songs and you're like, okay, where should this go? Like, I think if someone had never seen Newsies, but had listened to all the songs, they would put together like a more cohesive musical.
Absolutely. I also think that unfortunately, after King of New York, the songs all suck. Like it drops off a cliff and there is no real like banger in your back quarter of the movie or whatever. So you're just kind of left with kind of reprises and like it just doesn't really work. I have to say that is a classic Broadway tradition where the second act of Fiddler on the Roof has no songs that you know or care about. Like it's astonishing. You're like, how did they put all of the good songs in the first act? And they did. But why do they do that?
Because the second act is a huge bummer. It's like, pogroms.
That's why there's the term 11 o'clock number, because that's like, Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat is probably one of the more famous ones.
Isn't Memory also one of those?
I think so, yes. Yeah, it's like the song that you leave humming, but famously that just comes late in Act 2, and often the build up to that is kind of a slog. I just saw the Into the Woods revival when it was here in LA, and like Act 2 of Into the Woods is I prefer it to Act 1 story-wise. Song-wise, I think Act 1 has more memorable songs. But the smart thing they do there is they seed all the songs from Act 2 in Act 1. So when those themes come back, you're like, oh, this is what we were building to. And I think that was the thing Sondheim was really good at.
And you also get, I'm thinking like in Act 2, you get like a slightly more fun version of Agony, which you're like, that keeps you awake. And you get Last Midnight, and that's, a big diva number.
Yeah.
I also feel like, and again, you guys go far deeper on musicals than I do, but do you not usually get some sort of, I don't want to say a medley per se, but like something at the end that melodically reminds you like back to Act One of the bangers in Act One. Does that not sometimes happen?
Yeah. There's a lot of reprises. Yeah. I just noticed that King of New York is the Act 2 opener of the stage show, and that makes
which is
sense.
so smart. Yeah. They really they address the pacing in the musical in a way that is better.
Yeah, it is. I'm thinking about the end of this movie in terms of Jack. So Roosevelt shows up notoriously.
Of course,
as is in the history books, he showed up to save.
He should have sung. He should have sang.
Oh, that would have been great.
He should have sung a song.
And I genuinely think a mistake this movie makes is Pulitzer doesn't have a song. I think you need a villain song. I think they Robert Duvall. I don't know if he can sing. Yeah. He should have done. If he can't, he should have done the Rex Harrison talk sing thing.
Yeah,
this movie needs that.
Emily, a genius revelation. He needed a fun villain song.
Yeah.
Just like I think one of the many mistakes the Anastasia stage musical made was they
bad show.
Oh, bad show. A show that is bad starring Dana Crushes, Ramin Karimloo and Derek Klina, and it was still a bad show. One of the many mistakes they made is the villain, instead of being Rasputin, is a soldier named Gleb. And the Rasputin song from the movie is the most fun song. And the fact that okay, you want to make it a little more grounded. You don't want like a magical immortal wizard to be your villain, but give us a fun villain song.
I've seen the movie Anastasia one time, but I went to that with my friend. And at the halfway mark, I turned to her and I was like, doesn't this have a bat in it somewhere? Where's the bat?
Where's singing bat?
Listen, I am not a genius composer, but can you imagine if Robert Duvall just glowered at the camera and the strings were going dum, 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 and he went, now they may say I'm a reasonable fellow, but they call my journalism yellow. It would have been great.
It would be great. Yeah.
I would have loved it.
If he had a song like Hellfire, imagine how good this would be.
About how much he thinks Christian Bale is hot. That would have been weird.
Yeah, I would have loved it, actually, where he's weirdly sexually attracted to these dancing children. But also, he has to do what's right, which is,
But then the weird thing
not
too
paying
is that
them.
Pulitzer loses this battle against the Newsies. Did that happen in real life? Do we have any idea if it did?
Yeah. So according to an episode of You're Wrong About that I listened to,
okay,
they did win some concessions. It wasn't great, but it was a nice little victory. I mean, even in the movie, it's they don't get everything. They just are all right, well, we'll buy back your papers if you don't sell them.
Yeah, and he doesn't hike up the price.
Yeah,
right. Anyway, I guess he concedes. That's something. But yeah, so Roosevelt shows up, offers Jack a ride to the train station so he can go to Santa Fe.
Yeah.
And then apparently there was a scene at the train station that they ran out of money and they couldn't shoot it. So they were just he turns right around and he just comes back to town and is welcomed back with open arms. I guess there was a scene at the train station where I think he sings a reprise of Santa Fe, and you can tell that he recognizes that his real family are the Newsies. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's what that is. And then he shows up and he kisses Sarah. And I do think that the kid that plays, is it Jacob's brother, the little kid? He's great. I thought he was cute. Great. Yeah.
I also love Jacob's dad, who's as soon as I get back to the factory.
Yeah. They seem like a lovely family. I would also like to be part of that family.
Me too.
Did you like Jacob's family, Emily?
I love families. No, they're fine. They're fine. They are I get why they're there as an aspirational thing for Christian Bale. I'm also they're a little first drafty. They just feel a little bit there's not a specificity to them. They don't feel like a family. They feel like actors playing a family. And I can't even explain what I know what I mean by that, but also it's this intangible thing where sometimes you feel these actors have just clicked over and they just make sense as a family. And sometimes even in movies I love, it just feels like, yeah, they're pretending, you know?
They haven't clicked over. For
I
sure.
get
It
that.
does. It almost feels like a fake family, but I would almost argue that like in this one context that almost works.
Yes.
Because they are just supposed to be the most, you know, white bread, wonderful family that through Jack's eyes, they're just like a classic fun family.
And it is a little bit like he's holding out a photo frame that has the like picture that came with it in it and like looking at that and being like, what if I was a part of this family?
It does.
It is exactly that.
It does feel that way. I didn't know that Harvey Fierstein wrote the book for the musical.
That's why it's better. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, it seems like that might
He
be
made
the
it work
case.
a little bit better.
And it moved to Broadway in March 2012, ran for 2 years on Broadway. So I guess that was a big. I mean, is that a good run?
That's a hit. No, that's a hit. And also, there's like I think like because it's a great touring production, and it's a high schools do it with the rare high schools that have a lot of boys. Sure. It was a hit musical.
Yeah.
Emily, we have talked about Bill Pullman a little bit on this podcast. He was in the film Singles, which and we will talk about him again when he shows up as Dottie's husband in A League of Their Own. When we do that episode, which we should do soon. There's no reason not to, because we know who our guest is, obviously.
Yeah. Listen.
It's
yesterday I couldn't get
Emily's wife.
Yesterday I couldn't get a hold of my wife on the phone, and I was like, I started to get worried. And it turned out she just had her phone off. But I started to get worried, and I was like, oh my god, what if she's dead? What if she's blah blah blah? And then like fifth down the list was, well, who's going to do the League of Their Own? This woman and I write together, and we have a child together.
Yeah,
and
live
I was
together.
still like, listen, and I'm in love with her, and I was still like, oh boy, the League of Their Own episode.
We're gonna be really screwed on that. But Bill Pullman in this film is this feels like a kind of classically Bill Pullman performance, in the sense that he just seems like a nice guy who just does nice things. And I think that is really kind of his lane for a while, until I would argue Lost Highway is the moment when, at least for me personally, where I was like, oh, Bill Pullman, there's some darkness in Bill Pullman. Emily, what are your thoughts on Bill Pullman?
I I feel like he's one of those people that could only be, there's certain people who could only be stars in that specific decade they're stars in. He does feel like he could only be a star in the 90s. Yes. His thing where he's in Independence Day and he gives the speech and everything. Sure. If you made that movie today, I don't know that people would buy that moment in the same way.
No way.
I don't know who the Bill Pullman of right now is, but
no idea. No idea who that would be.
I mean, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's a little too interesting.
No, he's like a little too. He has like a little like kind of something going on beneath the surface.
He also still feels like a boy. Is the problem?
Boy,
just
like our best man.
I feel like Justin Hartley has big Bill Pullman energy. I feel like he could do it. I feel
in that he's kind of dull.
Josh Hartnett.
Yeah,
Josh Hartnett.
There we go. I
He's
saw
top
him
of mind because of Oppenheimer.
I saw him in Oppenheimer, and I was like, "Look at that snack!
Look at that guy."
Good Midwest. Yeah, that's the thing. Like Hartnett is Midwestern, corn-fed, beefy boy. You're just like, that's
Josh Hartnett is from Minnesota. He might be our
Minnesota nice.
But so Pullman's whole deal is just like he's a normal dude, and suddenly this normal dude becomes president. The 90s was this period when nondescript white men were everywhere, and it seemed like they were finally triumphing. And I think it was a response to the 80s being full of like overly muscular, overly huge dudes. Sure. And like the one guy from the 80s that crosses over, the two like the guys from the 80s who cross over are the Cruzes and the Hankses and the Fords, where they have, I feel like Costner really becomes a star in the 90s. So I count him, but they're very much like they pivoted from we are infallible men to we are normal men. And the thing about Cruz is that he finds a way back to infallible, and that's why he's such a weird, fascinating dude. But like Bill Pullman, he couldn't pivot to being infallible because you just do not believe that Bill Pullman could be Rambo.
No, It's really kind of interesting because like it's true what you're saying, Emily. He's got this kind of everyman white bread kind of like, you know, he's in 93 he's doing Sleepless in Seattle and Malice. You know what I mean? He's in While You Were Sleeping. He's in Casper. Like he's just like
generic, handsome, nice dad.
Yeah, it's just like that's his thing, which is why I think Lost Highway is such a kind of fascinating zag for him in terms of like trying to do something that people don't expect. But you're absolutely right, Emily. Like he has. I mean, what was the last thing he was in that I'm trying to even think of him? I mean, I'm sure he's been in stuff, but I'm trying to think of something that actually popped. But yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy. I liked him in this. He's in some TV. I guess he was in Halston. He was in that Halston thing. Anyway,
this is 20 years ago, but I really liked him in that weird like X-Files ripoff Revelations, where he like
yes.
he like went around and like was like looking at end times prophecies or whatever. I saw him on stage in David Mamet's most problematic play Oleana, and that's saying something, with Julia Stiles, and it was like what a weird production that was. I just feel like, I think it's time for a Pullman Sans.
You know, what's interesting is that I completely forgot about this show, but The Sinner did run for a while. The Sinner was
good in that. He's good.
He was in it looks like he was in a production of All My Sons with Sally Field.
Okay.
In London.
At the Old Vic. Yeah.
So, you know, he's doing
stuff.
He was doing some theater.
I like Bill Pullman. I've always liked him. I think he's very likable. I've never understood the Bill Pullman, Bill Paxton thing that people seem to like. They don't seem like they're playing the same game. Like,
they have very similar names.
They have similar names and they look a little bit alike, and they're both in the 90s. I don't know why that's confusing.
Anyway, sure. I liked him in this. I thought he was fun in this. In Newsies, that is. But yeah, this is a weird movie. Let's rate this, and then I'm curious, Dana, to hear your thoughts on what we're covering next week. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I'm curious as to what you might think about it. I saw this film in 92. I think I saw it with my grandmother in the theater. I'm pretty sure that I did. I definitely had the soundtrack, which I knew most of these songs far too well, but I don't think I loved it as a kid. I gave it like a 60 in 92. I'm going to give it like a 70 now. Like, I know that that's not like, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too generous, but I'm at a 70. Where are you?
People fucking love this movie, and it's okay to love this movie, even though I didn't see it until I was 39, you know?
Emily, what are your thoughts on this? What's your rating on this?
Well, I didn't see it till I was 39, so I give it a 39. No, I'm like high dislike. I'm basically like, I'm going to say like 48. I think there's a lot of this movie that works, and I think there's even more that doesn't. And the queerphobia scale, I'm going to give it a 1. I'm going to give it a 1 because it feels like this movie is just off camera, boys are kissing, and that is a vibe. So,
I absolutely agree.
I'm going to give it a 65.
Okay.
Because I think it's fun and sweet, but I don't think it's like a good movie.
Right.
I respect what it's doing. And I'll also point out that Bill Pullman's son, Lewis Pullman, was in Top Gun Maverick.
He was. And looks like a mini version of his dad.
That's why I was like, where have I seen Bill Pullman recently? And it's like,
he wore glasses in Top Gun.
He was a real Bill Pullman character in Top Gun.
Absolutely.
Just like sweet little boy. Sweet old boy.
I was thinking there's some very, very attractive boys in that movie.
Yes, there are.
But like everyone was like, you know, who's your and like obviously Glenn Powell is, God, he's hot. But then like the next one down, I was like, well, Bob, listen.
Bob,
hear me out.
Hear me out. Hold my beer. I want to talk about Bob. Yeah, he's really charming in that. I think that Lewis has done a bunch of stuff, right? Am I crazy? I think he's been in some other things as well.
He's going to be in the new Lessons in Chemistry with Brie Larson.
Okay. Hell yeah!
Right. So that's perfect casting. This guy's Lewis Pullman's going places.
He's the lead in the new Salem's Lot. That is perfect.
That's interesting.
They're doing a new Salem's Lot.
Yeah, they shot it already. It's coming out later this year, maybe next year. Don't know. Speaking of young actors going places, next week we're covering School Ties with Michael Hobbs. School Ties, just to give you a little Dana, a little primer. Brendan Fraser, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Cole Hauser, Chris O'Donnell. It is a who's who of young pretty boys from the 90s.
We're coming back to Lewis Pullman, but go ahead.
I've never seen this movie.
So this movie is What If Dead Poets Society, but anti-Semitism.
Oh.
Except not in the third act, which is about cheating.
Correct. Don't cheat on tests. But it's mostly about Jews. Should we trust them?
Who plays the Jew in that breakdown?
It is Brendan Fraser.
All right.
It's a little...
To some extent, the movie's about how he could pass as a Catholic, and you're like, you know what? Yeah.
You know why that is?
Yeah,
he does not seem Jewish.
He has a very Catholic coded face.
Yeah, that's actually something that we didn't talk about in the episode because we've already recorded it. But Emily, we didn't really talk about the fact that like the Jews in this movie don't radiate Jewish at all.
And I think like in the case of Brendan Fraser, that's ostensibly the point. But yeah, like
Sure.
all the other Jewish characters are just kind of like, we just slapped an actor in this part. Who cares?
But a little piece of trivia for you, Dana, that I'm not sure if you knew. This movie was written by Dick Wolf.
Whoa!
That's
so funny.
It's so weird.
His interests are both like Jewish discrimination at boys' Catholic school and also Law and Order.
Mostly Law and Order.
He claimed, like, we found some interview where he claims it's semi-autobiographical. So School Ties is Dick Wolf's The Fabelmans. So if you want to understand Dick Wolf,
it's Dick Wolf's Armageddon time.
Wow, it's his Armageddon time.
It's Dick Wolf's. It's Dick Wolf's. What the fuck is that Kenneth Branagh movie? Belfast.
Belfast.
It is. I do not recommend watching School Ties, Dana, but I'll just say maybe watch the trailer, just to see the baby face of Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, the most baby faced.
I love them so much.
It's also, and like Cole Hauser, like they clearly were like, friends, and that they all were in Good Will Hunting together, 6 years later, however many years later. It's kind of adorable. I just wish School Ties was a better movie. But Michael Hobbs is a great cast.
When I reached out to Michael to ask him to be on the show, he was like, "Yes, I'm so excited to talk about movies instead of And then he was like, "I'm picking School Ties because there's a bunch of boys in this movie. I'm interested in their careers going forward, and that's fun to talk about." And then we all realized none of us had seen the movie, and it was just kind of disastrous. But it's a fun episode.
It's a fun episode, and it's also similarly to Newsies. It's got a little bit of that, like, pop boy energy. Like, you got to wonder. I mean, Michael talked a little bit about the infamous shower fight where they're all like, and you're just like, I guess that's probably.
Should I see this movie?
There's some cuties in it. It is not a fun watch, but there's cuties in it.
The shower fight scene of a bunch of like naked young boys just punching each other is something.
Yeah.
But listen, it's a great episode, as was this. Dana, where can people find you? How can they hear your voice, your dulcet tones?
If you want to hear my voice talking into a microphone, you can listen to the podcast Noble Blood, available wherever you get your podcasts, or you could follow me on social media, Dana Schwartz, then with some extra Z's on the end, 3 Z's total. Or if you want to if you want to read my perspective on, floppy-haired boys in the 19th century grave robbing scene, check out my novels Anatomy, A Love Story, and Immortality, A Love Story.
Anatomy, very good book. Very good book.
Thank you very
much. Enjoyed it. Yeah.
Emily, thank you.
I don't know if I asked you this before, Dana, but did you do the audiobooks for your books?
No, it was a whole thing. They originally asked me, and I was like, great, I could talk into a microphone. And they were like, but you have to do a Scottish accent. And I was like, I can't do that. And then they I swear to God, they hired a accent coach for me. And I took like an hour and a half long lesson with like an accent coach to try to learn a Scottish accent. And by the end of it, I could like do it if I stayed in it. I was like, okay at it. And then to switch back and forth, because I would only do the accent for the character voices, but not like the dialogue, not the like text. It was, I could not switch back and forth. And I'm like, I can't do this. And so they hired like an incredible Scottish actor, which they should have done from the start.
Should I read my book?
Yes.
Right.
Obviously.
Absolutely.
Dana does amazing shit. You should check out all her stuff.
All her stuff.
I want to circle back to Lewis Pullman.
Yes, please. Very quick. Yeah. I mean,
he is in the movie, this 2023 movie that was my number one movie of the year for a long time until Oppenheimer unseated it. It's called The Starling Girl. He is amazing. He plays a youth pastor who gets involved with one of his charges, and it's a movie that's really smart about the complicated, like, icky ways that, like, that sort of sexual abuse between, you know, older teenagers and younger adults, like, it gets mired and
I've heard this
disgusting. It's such a good movie, and Eliza Scanlon is the titular Starling Girl, and Lewis Pullman plays this other guy, and they're both amazing. I would not be surprised if they're both, like, on my ballot at the end of the year. It is well worth watching. It's a great look into a part of American culture that rarely gets movies made about it. So
I'm gonna seek it out. I love that.
He's in something else that it's bugging me now as to what. Oh, maybe it was Battle of the Sexes or Bad Times at the El Royale. I do feel like I've seen him, and he does pop up from time to time, and he's great. And he's
got to do Top Gun Bob. They got to just do that.
Top Gun Bob. Dana, everyone should listen to your shit. They should read your books. They should listen to your podcast. But more than anything, thank you so much for coming on this and talking about Newsies.
Thank you so much. This was a treat.
You're the best.
Bye.
Can't wait to talk about movies and TV with you. Bye.
Bye.
Podcast like it.